Good morning, guys.
Morning, Nuno.
How are you?
Great. How about you?
Very good, thank you.
Good, good. A little chilly today on the East Coast.
Yes, it is.
I think it was in the 20s here today.
Yeah, it was pretty cold this morning.
Wayne, what you got?
We got the teens this morning. But we got freezing rain to start the storm, then 8 to 10 inches of wet, heavy stuff after that. So day 3 without power.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they're saying it's maybe another day to 2 days without it.
What?
Yeah,
Oh, Wayne, I had no idea.
yeah. So the old generator's getting some use.
Is it pretty much mandatory up there for you all to have a generator to keep it going?
More and more people are getting them all the time.
Yeah.
But the kicker is, Nicole, if you don't get the on-demand one installed by end of October, 1st of November, nobody will do it until spring.
Why? Because because the weather changes so quick. They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Because all the oil companies and gas companies are more geared towards home delivery than installations.
Got it. Yeah, I'd be one of those people like, oh, darn, I never got this done.
Yeah, that's where we were last year, so we did it this spring.
Yeah, good, 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 good. All right, so me and Monisha are here. We're just gonna make sure everybody logs in. We got a couple minutes till class starts. So we're just taking some roll behind the scenes and making sure we're all good to go.
Oh God, what a sight to see when I first log on here is that photo of mine. I think my COVID photos look better. Oh, good Lord. How are we all doing?
Well, Bernie, what we could do is we could put you in some PPE and have your photo be that.
There you go. I should put my COVID mask on.
You should.
And I'd be like an industrial hygiene superhero, which nobody would call because
You would stay far, far away from that guy.
I know. One of my kids are gonna come up to me and say, "Dad, I want to be an industrial hygienist just like you when I grow up." Oh. No, I'd be honored if they did that. We need more. My field's dying out, unfortunately, in the United States. Geez, I make good coffee. That should be my second business. How you doing, Wayne?
Good.
Did you lose power over the
Yeah,
weekend?
day 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're saying another day or 2.
Oh, so you don't have power still?
Correct.
How the hell are you on? You got a generator?
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, it was just warm enough down here.
No, we started off, like I was telling Nicole, with the freezing rain, then we got 8 to 10 inches on top of that.
Yeah.
So could have been worse. Like I was telling Jim earlier this morning, some places the state got 18 to 20 inches.
Wow. That's a first storm, huh?
Yeah,
It's not like Santa needs it anyway. He's got magic. He's got a magic sleigh and reindeer, right?
oh yeah.
He can go to Florida. He doesn't need snow. Oof, that's tough. Longest we were out without power was 11 days. Was it like 10 years ago when we had that huge ice storm?
Yeah.
I remember driving up to visit my wife's family in Maine, and just all the trees cut down on the side of the highway. They just, cut everything down because it all broke. So they neatly trimmed it up and just left the piles. That was a long one.
Yeah. Remember it
What?
well. My wife was in Florida and I was home with 3 kids.
Oh. Morning, Jim.
Good morning, Bernie. I'm slumming today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I did change shirts, so that made it a little better.
I'm sporting, oddly enough, the sweatshirt that Jim gave me there a couple of years ago. I had to steal this back from my wife. She said it was the most comfortable, warmest sweatshirt she's ever put on. I can never get it away.
Is that the one you got from Wayne or from
Yeah.
me?
Wayne, you didn't give me one, Jim. I didn't
I
even
thought
get
I'd give you one.
No. You just gave me a big vat of PCBs.
Do what?
I said, you just gave me a big vat of PCBs.
Yeah, I get that. What's even worse, my grandson was exposed to COVID from the therapist that he uses at school.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Jim.
So is
It
he,
ain't good.
is he sick? Test positive, or was it just?
Not, they are going to test him today. She didn't find out about it till yesterday. He don't talk or walk, so
Mm.
it's going to make it rough on him.
I mean, and it's tough because, even when school's doing the best they can, if they happen to be, funded enough, it's still, this virus is insidious. It gets through the best controls,
All the special needs kids like him, they're only having them come in twice a week, and and they're wearing masks and everything. But she started showing symptoms Friday, and then went and got tested, and so that's that 2 to 3 days prior to feeling symptoms. I'm sure he has a chance of getting it. So,
all right. Well, keep me updated, Jim.
oh, I will. Him having them seizures and everything, it might amplify it. I don't know what it'll do to it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Nothing. Oh, 10:02. All right, Nicole or Monisha, take it away. Somebody take it away.
All right, I'm going to take it away. But behind the scenes here, I'm sending login information to 2 more people. So give me 1 second. So we're waiting on 2 more from DC4 to log in. So we're all good. So I just sent that. So we're actually up to 13 participants, I believe now, for today's class. So as a participant, please make sure that you are interactive. Take yourself off mute if you need to ask a question. You can also use the chat box if you have any questions for Bernie. Jim Mcallister and Wayne Cummings are also joining the call as well, so that they've helped develop this course with Bernie, and they've had a lot of intimate knowledge with the PCBs, as you may have heard from the little discussion going on here. So any questions that you have, you can feel free to interrupt, put them in the chat. Monisha will be your point person for the day. So Monisha's on the call as well. And then we'll do some poll questions and that sort of thing throughout the class. So anything to help us maintain this to be a very interactive course, please do that. So Bernie's pretty good with getting to everybody's questions. So anything that you have, just make sure that we hear about it. At the end of the course, because this is an FTI course, you will have to take the end of course survey designed specifically for the online courses. So when we get towards the end of the week, we'll put that information in the chat. And so a lot of you guys are new. So we've got people from 77 on the call, and Bernie, you'll probably do some introductions here. So they're sort of brand new to the council, brand new to instructing, and brand new to the LMS. So we won't forget about you guys at the end of the week. We'll work with you to make sure that we can get your feedback on the class and the surveys and all of that sort of thing. And I think that's pretty much it. Let me check our count here. Okay, so we're getting up there with participants. So Bernie, I guess we can throw it to you. Monisha, if you have anything, feel free to jump in, but otherwise I think we're good to go and we'll sort of keep it moving. How's that sound, Bernie? Good? Good enough? Good intro? Bernie is not here. Where did Bernie go? Oh, there he is. Am I frozen? Are you guys frozen?
No, we're good. I think he's
All
trying to share his screen.
Bernie, you're muted.
There we go. How's that? It's something weird. It's like Zoom disappeared for a minute and said, we have an update for you, but it canceled my Zoom.
Oh, sweet.
Don't do that to me. All right, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We'll just go through some introductions, myself, Wayne, and Jim, and I think we got a small enough class where we can see who we've got here. So just to quickly start a little bit about myself, my name is Bernie Missoula. I'm a certified industrial hygienist. I've been practicing industrial hygiene for going on 26 years now. I did my graduate work at UMass Lowell. And for the most part, I've worked almost exclusively for labor, because I think it's important that we protect our union brothers and sisters. And I'll be quite blunt, it's always difficult when I used to do work with the private industry sector, especially if it wasn't unionized, because, well, it's like pulling teeth trying to get them to do the right thing to protect workers, even though we've got laws to do that, and they might not go as far as needed, but even that was sometimes a stretch. I got into industrial hygiene, which is a very, kind of an odd field, because my father was a lifelong union carpenter. After surviving World War II, which was amazing, as an infantryman in a mortar section in World War II, he decided to become a carpenter for the rest of his life. So he was, I think, 42 or 43 years he had as a union carpenter down in Springfield, Mass. And I grew up hearing stories, at my dinner table about, the kind of work that he did, what the job sites looked like. There were some injuries that my dad, witnessed. Luckily, he never got injured, and there were a few fatalities on projects that he was on as well. So I wanted to dedicate my life to being able to serve workers and use a scientific background to try to keep a place that's a little bit safer for all of us, and hopefully go home with a little bit fatter wallet and all the fingers and toes and the lungs working as they should, etc. With that said, I do a lot of training. I really enjoy it. And I think that you can't get any better bang for your buck of resource investment than putting on, really good, meaning awareness level health and safety classes. It reaches a lot of workers. One of the organizations that I did a lot of work with, the environmental NIHS, National Environmental Safety and Health Organization, one of their mottos was empowerment of workers through education. So if we can, get everybody to a certain level of understanding for health and safety, hazards and risks, it makes a better work environment. So for all those of you who do train and have been training for a long time, I thank you greatly. And for all of you that it sounds like we might have some new folks, welcome aboard. We need you. Thank you for wanting to do this. And it should be a lot of fun. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to the two people that really are behind the reason why I'm here initially. Wayne and Jim tracked me down somehow in the world and said, hey, you want to do this PCB thing with us? And one thing led to another. Now I'm the Director of Health and Safety for the IFTI and such. So Wayne, Jim, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Wayne Cummings. I'm at a DC 35 out of Boston. Recently retired in April, but Jim and I got together probably going on 4 years ago, Jim. We saw the need for this. What happened in our area up here in the Boston area was we had a big water treatment plant that was full of PCBs. The Water District did some testing, found out that it was PCBs, and they wouldn't let the painting contractor remove it because they said we didn't have adequate training. So they gave it to the laborers, and that job is now just winding down, and it's almost 4 years later. So in my previous life with DC 35, though, I was the industrial instructor for the last 14 to 15 years. So that's where I came from. Jim?
Now you can hear me, can't you?
Yes.
Anyway, I'm Jim Mcallister. I've been in the painting business now for almost 35 years. Been training for 30 with District Council Lady and with the International. Like he said, we had a need for the PCBs. Contractors in my area are demoing plants and bridges, taking it down, and the stuff is there. And there is no standard for it. That sounds like
2 guys.
do anyway. But we got with Bernie, and it's went a long ways. We've got a good course here. If y'all pay attention, you'll learn something. So other than that, that's it. Can you hear me, Wayne?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Wayne and Jim. Yeah. So what we're going to do, the way, and I'll have folks introduce themselves in a moment. What we're going to do is we're going to go through this class. It's designed as an 8-hour course. Face-to-face was how we did it. Back when we developed this class, we had no idea COVID would be right around the corner. Thus, we're doing it online now. So we're going to do 2 hours a day to cover the 8 hours. And then on Friday, we're going to do a train the trainer session for 8 hours. So we'll talk about, the course, how to deliver it. We're going to do that too as we're going through this because it's the first time that folks have seen this. And we're going to talk about some of the resources and things like that that you can use as an instructor on Friday as well. This is meant to be participatory. We do want folks to ask questions if they have them, bring up, case and points if you got experience on the job. And Wayne and Jim are going to co-teach this with me. So anytime they want to jump in, folks, we've done this a number of times together already. Feel free to jump in there and say what you got to say. So with that, who would like to go first? Introduce yourself, just say where you are, maybe how long you've been doing training and why you wanted to take this class. Who's first?
Talk to us, Matt.
Somebody, anybody.
All right, I'll go. My name is Nino Portella. I'm with DC 711 out of New Jersey. I've been the health and safety coordinator with the FTI New Jersey for about 8 years now. And this is important. We have a lot of members that are exposed to chemicals, obviously. Bridge painters, a lot of them working steadily. And I think this is just great information for me to be able to pass on to them.
Welcome, Nuno. I remember you now. I've quite a bit. I think I've seen you on a number of classes.
I've been on quite a few lately.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. What else? Who else we got?
I'm Matt Naska with DC4. Been in the training for about 10, 12 years. I'm still in the field. This is definitely a good course. We just, we don't want to see, anything happen here like happened in DC 35. We actually have a local contractor that did a water tank, a drinking water tank, that they found PCBs on the outside and said there was nothing on the inside. So when they did the inside, they did it with recyclable material and it came back hot. So I think that's been almost 4 years ago. The recycler's still sitting, dust collector's still sitting. Everything they used is still sitting. They can't use it. So it's an issue. So I'm sure we're going to start to see more of it. So definitely that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Butler, DC 77. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm trying to become a trainer, trying to get everything I can. I'm actually in New Jersey this week hunting, but I make sure I have time for this in between. So
Now that's dedication. Off on a trip hunting and you were able to take the class. Wow. Okay. Welcome. Thank you. Who else?
My name is Justin Oshel. I'm from DC6. I've been in training for 6 years, 4 years part-time. I oversee a lot of the safety stuff here, so just all the information I can gather to pass on to our members is good.
All right, welcome. Who's next?
I'm Mike Sylvia from DC4. This PCB stuff is relatively new to me. I am now the health and safety officer here. But I did research it a little bit and found that it's in a lot of different things. Our food supply, as well as all some of the caulks and stuff that we used to use as glazers. And just like to sprout the message to not just our glazers, but even our family members as to things that in our everyday life that contain PCBs and how to live with them.
Absolutely. Okay, welcome. And anybody else? Who else we got?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Justine Goulder. I'm out of District Council 81, Quad Cities, Iowa. I've been training for 4 years. Just recently, at the beginning of the year, became a training coordinator under Howard Baker, who is having audio problems. But I'm taking this course to become more aware of this and have the ability to share this information with the guys that I'm training.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Anybody else? Did we miss anybody? Well, if we did miss anybody, we're gonna move forward. Just jump in and say who you are, where you're from, etc. What I want to do now, I think I'm gonna get into the course a little bit, but I'd like to show a poll. I want to have folks take a poll. So Monisha or Nicole, if you could throw that first poll question up for us. All right, so go ahead and answer this. All right, so I guess this is complete. So the question is, have any of you come across PCBs while working on a job site? Just about almost split. So 57% said yes, 43% said don't know. For those folks who don't know, I don't blame you. It is difficult to know unless you test. And as we go through this awareness course, we're going to find out that the employer doesn't necessarily have to test for these things. And there's some caveats to that with worker health and safety that we'll get into as we go through the week. But this is unfortunate. So the only way that you're going to actually know if these things are out there is if they have been evaluated. If they've either been a bulk test, like they took some of the caulking material or a coating, something like that, and sent it off to the lab. Or if it was, evaluated for airborne exposure, either for the general public or for a worker, then you'd know. But we're going to talk about the reasons why an employer might not have to do anything to begin with. So with that, so I'm going to get into the course a little bit. And what I'd like to start off by saying is that this is a hazard and a material that really fits well within the IUPAT realm. Just as a side note, one of the reasons why I was so excited about coming on board to work with the IUPAT was really our members face a lot of hazards out on the job because, not only do we have the typical construction hazards, right? Falls, struck by, things like that, but the work that we do is with a lot of different chemicals, whether it be, you know, from coatings to, you know, to the solvents to help make those ready or clean surfaces, to flooring, the adhesives and things that we might use, you know, for wall coverings or flooring, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff. And PCBs are one of the historic contaminants that have been around for a while. And, you know, as Jim gave the example, you know, there was a job that came up in Massachusetts where there was some PCBs involved, and Massachusetts state government wanted to make sure that any contractor had their workers appropriately trained so that they could be protected from it. So in addition to this just being a good environmental health and safety topic to train workers on for their own protection, I think in doing so, you know, it can really open up the floodgates to work. Because as we're going to see between today and tomorrow's module, there's a lot of places that potentially could contain PCBs. And, you know, Jim's been doing a lot of work in his area of the country, in industry that specifically speaks to having a lot of PCBs in the
bunches of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
The hydroelectric dams, the power plants, even the government buildings are full of it down there. And the EPA and OSHA both, I've had meetings with both of them here in our area. It's around Arkansas. And they're interested, but it's got to go become law somehow. So we got to work with our political guys and get it shoved through the Senate, and that maybe it'll work out. Sorry, Barney.
No, it's team teaching here, Jim. I can't do this lift on my own. So, you know, Jim speaks to something about a law. So unfortunately, a lot of times, you know, employers won't do something for a worker unless it's in a law. A good example is we've got, you might have heard of this, a disaster site worker course. So it's a course that, you know, we developed, a few years after 9/11 occurred and Hurricane Katrina and Rita, so that workers can go and do disaster response and post-disaster cleanup operations in a more safe way. And unfortunately, there's no law that dictates workers be trained on it. It's a really good thing because it does, you know, introduce workers and make them aware of a lot of these hazards that are associated with that work and controlling the hazards. But it's not like, say, HAZCOM, right? Where the HAZCOM standard requires workers be trained on it. So what happens? Workers get trained on it. If we don't have standards for some of these things, an employer might not do it. So one of the things that's kind of cool about this subject is, you know, Anton, when Jim and Wayne and myself brought this up, and at the time, Dan Pensky Jr. Brought this up about, you know, a rule, you know, Anton thought it was a good idea to pursue something like that. So the IAPAT in some form or fashion, you know, in the near future is going to embark on the process of, you know, hopefully being an industry leader in trying to get a rule for a PCB worker abatement rule, you know, on the books, just like we have for asbestos and lead. And we'll talk about why that makes a lot of sense. So this would be a good thing moving forward. So with that, besides this stuff being very toxic, as we're going to see, besides this stuff being out there, it's a good line, you know, to access some more work for members that fits, again, well within the realm of what the IUPAT does. So let's look at this course. And again, this is designed to be taught, you know, face-to-face. It's got 4 small group activities to go with each module. But nonetheless, we're here in COVID and it actually works fairly well online. So, and the timing for this would be a little different, speaking to you all as trainers. So, you know, depending upon if we're face-to-face, the amount of small groups that you've got, the number of students, you know, giving time for report backs is always going to depend on how many folks you got in the class. You got, you know, closer to 20, it's going to take you closer to the 8-hour course. If you got 10 people in the class, you'll probably end up somewhere around 7 hours or so. It really depends on a lot of the discussion and small group activity. So let's look at how this course is set up. It's in 4 sections. We're going to look at introduction to PCBs today. Tomorrow, we're going to cover toxicology and environmental aspects. Then we're going to look at regulations, guidelines, and worker rights. And finally, additional concerns for working with PCB containing building materials and PCB waste. There is a lot of stuff there for an awareness level, but we've been able to touch on a lot of these things and try to broach into the next section. So what I mean by that is Jim, Wayne, and I have, through the IFTI, developed a PCB worker abatement course, which we were going to teach, I think last, what was it, March or something? And then the pandemic came. This is something that has to be taught face-to-face because they are just like asbestos and lead. There are a lot of hands-on activities with it. So hopefully, you know, we're going to get this back out again on the training calendar once we can meet face-to-face. So the intent is if you've taken the awareness level class, those folks would be invited to enroll, you know, in the course that we deliver next. And I think we're going to probably, and I don't want to step on Nicole and Manisha's toes here, but I think we had folks scheduled for the first course that took the training initially, and then that got canceled. So they might be first in line, but if you're interested, you know, we'll have another class that we can put on as well. So, and if I'm misspeaking on that, Nicole or Manisha, let me know, since you guys are the wizards at the training calendar. All right, so the learning objectives at the end of this lesson, the students will be able to define what PCBs are, list 5 sources of PCBs that you may encounter at your job site, list 3 health effects of PCB exposure, describe the testing requirements for PCBs under the Environmental Protection Agency, state the OSHA for PCBs, describe worker exposure testing, and describe the hazard controls related to job-specific health risks. So this is what you're going to get out if you teach, you know, you take the whole 8-hour course. This course is awareness level only, so it does not, you know, supersede or replace duty-specific training. For instance, you need to wear a respirator depending upon your exposures to PCBs. This does not cover that. Your employer would have to give a separate respiratory protection course. Also, it's awareness level, so this does not, you know, approve in any way or qualify students in any way to be able to go out and abate, you know, PCBs that are in building materials. So why should we bother taking an awareness class? Anybody have any insight to that? Oh, I accidentally hit my mouse. Why should we take an awareness course on PCBs? Any thoughts?
So we have an idea of where these things could be, especially if you don't know anything about them. It's the same as lead and
Yeah.
asbestos.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It's the same as lead and asbestos, and we're going to see how those are the deadly trio here as we go through. So, you know, for awareness level stuff, it's great if you can introduce workers or the public, for that matter, to something that might affect them, you know, negatively, where they can at least say, "Hey, boss, you know, did we do tests on this?" Which opens up, particularly for PCBs, a nasty can of worms that we're going to look at, because if the employer does not have to test for it, or the building owner, and those are different entities, and we're going to talk about that later, how is a worker going to get protected if PCBs were there, but the employer didn't quantify them? So this is going to be a tricky thing that we're going to discuss as we go through. And it's a real sticking point in the realm of workers' rights. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go through. So not only, you know, do PCBs potentially affect a worker who's working with the material, but this stuff can get out into the environment. It can harm the environment. It can harm public, you know, whether it be, you know, kids at a school and teachers and staff at a school, or it can, you know, damage the environment, like polluting our waterways and such. And we'll cover that quite extensively at the awareness level. So now we're going to cover the first module or section. So this is number 1, intro to PCBs. And again, if you guys have, girls have any experience with this stuff, you want to share something, please do, because this is an adult education grounded course. We want to have some interaction. And, you know, I learn a lot, especially because, you know, everybody here is doing the work out with the coatings and the materials that contain PCBs. So as an industrial hygienist, it really benefits me to know your experience out on the job. So the EPA estimates that cleaning PCBs from every contaminated building in all of the states is going to cost somewhere between 150 and 200 billion. Now, imagine how long that's going to take to actually do. So it's not just the huge dollar number that's there, the actual scope of work. It's going to take many, many decades, to clean this up, just like with asbestos and lead. Asbestos is something our grandkids, if they, are still going to be hearing about, in building materials. So what are these things? A lot of us might have heard of PCBs. It stands for polychlorinated biphenyls, and it's a man-made product. What they do is they take chlorine atoms and they take a biphenyl, which is a organic chemical. And an organic chemical means it's got carbon in its formula. So it's carbon based. That's what we mean by an organic chemical. They heat these up in a process and then it turns into a PCB. And this is what the molecular structure looks like. So these are phenyl rings. And we've got some chlorine on here. And the takeaway from this that I want folks to know, this phenyl structure here makes these things very, very stable. You might have heard of the chemical benzene, right? We actually have a benzene standard. It's a really nasty carcinogenic chemical that was used quite a bit. It's found as a component in gasoline. In fact, in Europe, they say we're gonna go fill it with benzol. It's part of our gasoline that we use, but it's in a lot of other organic products. And it's hard sometimes to separate things out and have them completely pure. And benzene's nasty because it's stable. These rings here make this chemical be able to stay around in the environment for a really long time. And we're gonna see why that's important and detrimental to us. So they're useful in manufacturing, as we're going to see, but the problem is, just like with asbestos, it's a great material that does a lot of good stuff for us, but it's also very harmful. It's harmful to humans, the environment, animals, and we're going to look at why. So a PCB is going to have, and there's a number of them, we're going to look at that here, but they've got a chemical formula. So the number of carbons, hydrogen atoms here, and then the number of chlorines. So the PCBs will be different based on the number of chlorines that it's going to have in its chemical formula. We see here's a boiling point, 527 to 842 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a very high boiling point. That's one of the things that makes PCBs very useful, is that it boils at such a high temperature. You can identify it somewhat by its color: thin, lightly colored liquid, yellow or black waxy solid. Most of them are insoluble in water. So if you dump them in water, they're not going to dissolve, right? And the solubility in water decreases with the more chlorine atoms that you have in its molecular formula. So again, they're phenyl rings and they're all connected by the number of chlorine atoms. The more chlorine atoms, the kind of more toxic that this material becomes, not just for us, but for the environment. They don't have any known taste or smell. And again, they've got a color that's somewhat uniform, but it's got a range of it. There's really no way to tell that you've got PCBs in a material unless you actually do testing on it. You're not going to be able to identify it by a color or anything like that because it's mixed in with another material. You're not going to be able to identify it with consistency like you can, if you've worked around lead or asbestos long enough. Like I can go in and I can look at pipe lagging on an elbow or something like that and say, chances are that's asbestos. But I would never, give my final opinion on that without testing. I can look at a type of paint, depending upon, if I know when it was implemented onto that structure or surface, and I can see how it might be flaking and say, that might have lead in it. But I would never give my final opinion unless I get it tested. PCBs, it's more difficult. So like with lead and asbestos, no matter what, if I'm going in to do an assessment, I test it anyway. I don't leave it up to chance. But with PCBs, you're not going to be able to look at it and say, that same thing. Oh yeah, that could be PCBs and I'm going to test it. There is a worldwide effort to get all PCBs out of circulation by 2028. That is a very big undertaking. And this here is an example of PCB transformer oil that was looked at in Rwanda. They were doing some sampling of this here to test it. But this stuff is all over the globe. So PCBs consist of 209 different chemical congeners based on differing amounts of chlorine atoms. So there's 209 subspecies of these, if you will, okay? And it all depends on the number of chlorine atoms that they have. And typically what happens is you don't just have like say PCB, 1242. It's got some other conjugers in it as well that makes it not pure. So they're all a mixture of these. Many have 50 or more with varying chlorine atoms. The last two digits in the code represent the percent of chlorine atoms by mass. So for instance, Aerochlor, 1242 and 1254. This is a very popular, wide used PCB. This code means that 42% of that material by mass is chlorine atoms. So like here, more than 50% of this chemical PCB conjugator is chlorine atoms. There were 130 used in different formulations, different trade names, but the Aerochlor is a very popular one, and they were useful and put into thousands of products. PCBs are persistent due to their very stable chemical structure. Remember, I mentioned that due to this ring. So they don't break down very easily. You can put them in materials and it helps keep that material stable. It gets released into the environment as contamination. It doesn't break down and go away. And the more chlorine atoms that you have, the more stable it is, the more toxic and the more persistent that is going to be in the environment. And it also makes it less volatile. So I want to go back to this issue of volatility. What does it mean to be volatile if a chemical is volatile? What does that mean? Can somebody explain what volatility means?
That means it's very reactive.
Not necessarily reactive. So you could have a volatile chemical that is not reactive. Which, by the way, I'm going to plug. I'm teaching a class on a chemical and physical properties in December, and I think in January, if you want to sign up for it. What does it mean to be volatile? Let me ask you this. If
It usually evaporates.
Yes, it evaporates, right? So volatility means that you have something in a liquid form and it gets up into the atmosphere in a gas-like phase. So you can have things that are more or less volatile. So how many people here have used paint thinner of any kind? How about something
Yes.
like maybe a toluene or a xylene to do cleaning or something of a surface, right? So what do you think is more volatile, that paint thinner or a toluene or xylene or water? Which one will get up into the air faster?
Xylene?
Yeah, all those organic solvents, they are very volatile, and volatility is connected to temperature. So the warmer something is, typically the more volatile that chemical will be. And which brings us back to PCBs. They are not very volatile. They are a solid or waxy, oily-like liquid. So they're very, slow moving. If you put them in something, they will stay that way. They do evaporate. So they do have a vapor pressure. They do volatilize, but it is incredibly slow, which is one of the reasons why they're useful. But it's one of the problems for us and for the environment. So the volatility of PCBs, them being very, very low volatility, make them a useful thing, but also a harmful thing. Monsanto is responsible for 99% of the US made PCBs. So about 1.4 billion pounds of it was created by Monsanto. Production began in the early 1920s. And this is an old photo from the GE plant in Pittsfield, Mass. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with that area. Pittsfield is right on the border of New York. And that whole area up there, you know, in the Hudson River, they've got incredibly nasty polluted PCB, you know, bed floors of rivers and water bodies up there, because GE did a lot of work. And you can do news searches now, and you can follow some of the cases about GE, and they're still trying to, you know, to settle these cases and do what they're supposed to do to protect public health, you know, after their use of these things. So this is a timeline for PCB. So in 1865, the first PCB-like chemical was discovered. It was a byproduct of coal tar, and this was connected to chimney sweeps. And if you've ever delved into occupational health and safety history, chimney sweeps seem to be like a canary in the coal mine. They were a trade that suffered a lot of pretty serious ill effects from the work that they did, because when you burn stuff, you produce a lot of nasty chemicals. And what did they do? They went around and cleaned this stuff up, right? And you've probably seen photos of them all, you know, with soot all over themselves and their clothes, things like that. If anybody is a fan of the original Mary Poppins films, old Bert there and all his chimney sweeps, how dusty and dirty they were. In 1927, they were first manufactured and commercially available by a company called Anniston Ordnance Company in Anniston, Alabama. So PCBs are a man-made product, like I said before. It's not something that is naturally found in the environment. They're there because we created them and put them there. In 1936, scientists issued a report attributing worker disease symptoms. So now, just like with lead and asbestos, you know, manufacturers, employers knew this stuff was fairly toxic a long time ago. Why do you think it took so long, right, for workers to be protected around these kinds of things? The ban of PCBs was in '79, and we
They had
knew
no
that-
option.
What's that?
They had no option. They knew it was dangerous, but it was such a useful
Yeah.
chemical.
Yep. And did we have an OSHA back then? No. Nope. It was called, yeah, you don't want to, you know, subject yourself to this. We got another worker who wants to come after you. So you either do it or that's it. So good thing we have OSHA now, right? 1937, a study published in the Journal of Industrial Hygiene and Toxicology showed a link between PCBs and liver disease. So, you know, fairly early on after its use, we started to find out, you know, that this stuff was harmful for us. And GE really began using them in electrical equipment in the 1940s. In 1970, annual US production peaked at about 85 million pounds in that year. In '73, the US FDA establishes a tolerance of 5 parts per million in fish. So here's something, we're not at worker protection yet, but you know, the FDA has determined, hey, this stuff is toxic, and now we're finding it in our food supply. So they actually had to implement, you know, a limit in fish. And we're going to connect this with tomorrow's module about, you know, toxicity and PCBs in the environment. So if you like to fish and things like that, and you actually like to eat the fish you catch, like I do, depending upon what it is, PCBs is a concern for me or for you. Congress passed the Toxic Substances Control Act in '76. In '77, Monsanto stopped its manufacture, and then in '79, it was finally banned. But as we're going to find out, you know, PCBs still might be in some new products to, you know, a small degree. And it's in those old products to a large degree. And so the US PCB production occurred from 1927 until their ban. And again, most of it, you know, Monsanto. PCBs were sold in the US under many different names and trade names. So it's important to, you know, be able to search and figure out what those are. So here is a current updated, you know, GHS label for Arochlor 1254, which, you know, we mentioned before was one of the popular ones. And lo and behold, there's actually still used in our industry today. Any comments or questions so far about how this stuff came into being, who manufactured it, anything on the timeline? Okay. So based on mounting evidence, PCBs were toxic to humans and wildlife. Manufacture and import of it did cease in 1979. And this is a really interesting thing to recognize. So today, PCBs are classified as a probable human carcinogen, and they are listed in the top 10% of EPA's most toxic chemicals. So you might run into stuff that, affects the environment more than humans, or wildlife, more than the environment and humans together. But PCBs does it all. It's an all-encompassing, equal opportunity harmful chemical. So as workers, we really want to be aware of what this stuff is, where to find it, how to protect yourself and control it. And as the public, we want to make sure that this stuff doesn't find its way into our food supply, into our environment, and into our bodies, right? Now we're going to get into where the stuff is. And, this is kind of mind-blowing. We, Wayne and Jim, showed this, some of these slides sort of like as an infomercial to different degrees for a couple of sessions that we did. And it was an eye-opener for folks who are in the IUPAT, union for their career. Folks just didn't know that they might have been around it or that it was to this degree. So again, a great opportunity for work, down the road, but also a very important necessity that we educate ourselves on this stuff so that we're not going to be potentially harmed from it. Oops. Although no longer commercially available, PCBs, may be present in a lot of places that you might be doing work on, and we're going to get into that. Does anybody know what this is a photo of here?
Cool.
A school, yeah, good stuff. So, either Wayne or Jim mentioned, public buildings, stuff like that. Schools, office building, military bases, energy places, all kinds of, facilities you're going to find this stuff in. So they can be found in many building materials, especially stuff that IUPAT members work with. And you can see what I'm talking about here as we go through a couple of slides. But before we do that, because we like sharing experience and information, folks can take out this activity 1. So this is sharing your thoughts on health, safety, and PCBs. So we're going to take, I have here, 30 minutes. So since we got a small class and this is online, I want folks to kind of split this up in your groups. Nicole and Monisha is going to set us into some groups. Go ahead and answer questions 1 through 6. About how you feel about PCBs and what your thoughts are on that. So let's set the clock up for 10 minutes in our small group. Then when we get back together, we'll take about 5 minutes and go through this activity. Sound good, Nicole, Monisha?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, and you don't have to put me, Wayne, or Jim in a group.
Okay.
We don't want to taint anybody's activity experience.
All right, 1 second. How many people do we have? All right, so I'll do 3 groups.
Sounds good.
Looks like it automatically assigned.
Well, what I did is, yeah, I just left the group.
Yeah, okay, hopefully they could just see.
Looks like Matt needs to get thrown into a group here.
Matt, you're in group 3. So you should have got a notification to join. Matt?
Is Matt with is it Justine? I think that's her name. She said that somebody was having audio trouble.
Yeah, it was Howard Baker was having issues
Okay.
in DC4.
All right.
Okay, it looks like you joined now. So,
Cool. All right. I'm going to step out of the room for just a second. Be right back.
Oh, okay.
hey, Wayne, you can remove yourself from the group if you need to.
I'll just sit here and listen.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Sorry.
Monisha,
Yes.
is it possible to increase your group activity time to 15 minutes?
15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I think we have more than we have more than enough time to do it.
All right, so we'll end about 11:05.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
I
set the
did
timer.
check the time.
It's 10:50 right now, so my time. So I will set the timer. I'm gonna hop in a group just because we're recording right now, just to
Okay.
get some footage. All right, be right back.
Sounds good.
But I guess like, right, it's in paint, right? It would be like in the caulking around the windows. I mean, I've taken this class before. I don't know another. I don't know if you said it, but the balusters for the lights, isn't it in lights or something? Like the old fluorescent bulbs or something. And he may not have gotten to that yet, to be honest. All right, so number 3, agree or disagree? PCBs are harmful to human health. Yes.
PCBs.
So like electrical components, paints.
Yep.
What was something else?
That's in cable insulation, thermal insulation, adhesives, oil-based paint. Carbonless copy paper contains it as well. It's in floor finish also.
Question number 3, agree or disagree? PCBs are harmful to human health, are by far the greatest hazard that will be faced during your work that may include PCB exposure.
Well, they're definitely harmful to human health. I mean, they cause cancer, different types of cancers.
So is that agree? I mean, it said the most harmful, don't it?
Yeah, it's kind of 2 parts. It says they are harmful to human health. I think we'd all agree with that. But then the second sentence, it says they are by far the greatest hazard that will be faced during your work that may include PCB exposure. I don't know about
Yeah,
greatest.
it's probably not
Great.
the greatest, but
Let me give y'all a little knowledge check on this. This stuff is skin contact, guys. You get it on your skin, it's going to go in your system.
Okay, so
It's that bad.
so it's agree all the way around.
Yeah. It don't matter if it's dry, wet, whatever, it still goes into your system. And this, he showed that picture of the kid, the school. It's thinking them kids are being exposed to this every day.
Wow.
I gotta be quiet.
Question 4, agree or disagree? PCBs are the only concern for worker exposure and worker health.
Disagree.
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 Disagree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then number 5, agree or disagree? PCBs are easy to detect and may be recognized without testing.
Disagree.
Disagree. And then it's got a match. So match this on the left with this on the right.
Let me,
1979.
That would be C, wouldn't it? 1979, when EPA issued final
Yeah.
regulations.
Yes. See, Monsanto. I wonder if it'd be easier to read the right side and then match the left. Let's go with B. When PCB production and use started?
1927.
1920s.
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 Yeah, they got the answer of the 1920s. So 1920s would be. When EPA issued regulations banning the manufacture of PCBs.
1979.
Yep. Got that one already. Oh, we skipped A. 209 different chemical congeners.
Chlorine atoms. Chlorine atoms.
All right, let's go with that.
Subspecies. It's subspecies, right? Is that one of them?
No.
there's 209 different ones. It all depends on the chlorine atoms that's in it.
Okay. D. These may also be found along with PCBs.
Asbestos and lead.
Yeah. I was thinking it while you were saying it. E. First PCB-like chemical discovered.
Wasn't that Monsanto?
1865.
Yep. Sub E. F. Most commonly used PCB congener.
That was Airchlor, right?
Yeah, let's go with that. G. Scientists issued a report attributing workers' disease symptoms. 1937.
36.
Oh, it's 36. Okay.
36, yeah.
G. Exposure risk. Would it be caulking?
What letter is that?
H. Caulking?
See, I think PCB exposure is. Yeah, I would say so. Caulking, right?
It's the only thing that's left that fits. I. The number of this makes the PCB conjugate more stable, toxic, persistent, and less volatile?
209.
Oh. The number of chlorine atoms.
So 209.
209, yeah.
Okay. I don't know, the way it's worded is weird. J, made 99% of US PCBs. Monsanto.
Is there coffee left?
No.
I think that's it.
What was the question for Jay?
They made 99% of US PCBs. I think that was
Was,
Monsanto.
Monsanto.
That's what I wrote down in my notes.
Yeah, I think so. Is that it on them 6?
I think so. I think that's it.
Jim, I met you at Glenn's retirement party. Weren't you down in Alabama?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep, I
Remember
was
seeing-
there. I've
Yeah,
been
that
working with
big truck.
Glenn for a lot of years,
Yeah, he's
around
a
him and
good one.
everything else.
Yeah.
Now he's retired, and all the old guys are retiring out and leaving me.
That's
So
why I
it
told him,
ain't
I said,
good.
you guys, I said, that's some big shoes to fill. I said, you guys better start giving me some training.
You and Alan's got your hands full.
I guarantee that.
He definitely likes it. I met Chuck in 1987. Somewhere around there. Let
He'd
me
be
get off here.
I'll say they should be bumping us back in here soon.
How you say your name? Nuno?
Nuno.
We're converting our classrooms to Zoom rooms so that, let's say, Justine, for example, you're scheduled to come to class, but let's say you got a fever or something. It's not necessarily COVID, but you've got the flu.
Ah, hey, Manisha. You there?
Sorry, I was trying to find my Zoom screen.
It's okay.
One
Well, good thing you left. My wife knocked on the door and then she's like, "Can I come in?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'm just on a break." And then she runs across, grabs something and runs out. I said, "Oh, looks like I'm still on the screen." She's like, "Oh, hello." But I think since you left to the other room, she's not on it.
Oh,
Zoom trouble.
it's so hard working off of one screen.
Yeah.
I only have my laptop today. I'm not
Oh,
double monitors. So it's been a struggle.
yeah. It's really caused everybody to work differently, and Good things are coming though soon. Well, soon meaning a few months, but still.
Hopefully.
You know, I made a sandwich yesterday for the first time in months, because usually like every school day I would make the kids lunch.
Hmm.
And typically, 2 or 3 days a week sandwiches. I'd make one myself. I realized I have not had a sandwich for like 8 months.
Oh wow, it felt weird making it.
It did. I'm like, why am I missing this? I mean, like our eating habits were pretty good, but I noticed like once the school schedule went out, the rest of our schedules went out too.
I know. Yep. So do you think we're gonna be required to take the vaccination to like travel? I've been hearing, because I heard that some Australian airline, that's like a requirement now.
Yeah. So if it's a private group, they can do that, because we would be using their equipment, their staff, etc.
Hmm.
And still do have requirements for vaccinations and other health regulations through states. Like for instance, when I worked at a school once, and I had to get a TB test, right, to make sure that I didn't have that. If you want to go to certain schools, you have to get vaccinations. You can opt out of them with certain reasoning, but yeah, so it depends. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Because I know a lot of people are like kind of against vaccinations. Well, not a lot, but I know some people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't know.
it's gonna be crazy.
It is crazy because they work. Some of the conspiracy theories, it's crazy how these things get developed. And it's like, people talk to me about it like they're an expert. And I'm like, so if you need open heart surgery, you're going to do that on yourself?
Right.
You go to an expert. So if we have a basic, breakdown of trust for,
Mhm.
trusting people that they've dedicated their life to doing, it gets tough. I mean, there's not a Dr. Kevorkian around every corner. Do you know who that is, Dr. Kevorkian?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, so the joke is, it's not a good morning if you say good morning, Dr. Kevorkian. So he was a licensed medical doctor that would aid people in medical assisted suicide. And I can't remember what state he was in. And, there was a number of court battles to see if it was legal for him to do that, et cetera, et cetera. But, most experts get into doing something because they want to be good at it, et cetera. Not all, obviously, but look, Obama, the GW, and Clinton said, once they say it's safe, we're getting a vaccine on camera for everybody to see.
Another thing about that, when people are saying like, what if they're not really getting the vaccination? Like, they could show things. They could be injecting water for what we,
It could never end, right? It could never end with these theories. I don't know.
It's just crazy. It's always something.
It is always something. Like at some point, you just have to, state the facts as you believe them as a practitioner in whatever field you do to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if people want to argue, don't believe you, or come up with something crazy, you got to walk away.
Right.
Otherwise, I guess at some point, since we all have finite resources, including time and emotional energy,
Mm-hmm.
you got to go help the people that will accept it, I guess.
Yeah.
But they're still
in
working
these days.
Yeah, I know. All right, we got everybody back?
Not quite. I think we have. I'm missing a.
I can't wait to do a small group activity in person again. Watch my first day back in person. I'm gonna trip over my own feet, hit the floor. Oh, that'll be great. What'd you trip over, Bernie? My feet. I'm not used to being up in a classroom. It's been a year. Well, good news is that Santa's got all his presents wrapped already. He's not up till 1 a.m, the day of Christmas.
All right.
The good things out of the pandemic. Christmas presents are wrapped on time. All right, everybody back yet? I see 14, Manisha, but I don't know if everyone's back.
Yep, looks like we have everyone.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen again. Let's see, where were we here? Here we go. So activity 1, as you can see here, we have this fine photo of Mr. Wayne Cummings teaching a class at some point before retirement, which, by the way, is something that's always really useful for me to have, and probably for everybody else, are photos. So if you've ever got like cool photos of training, small group activities that you do, if you want to send them my way, that would be awesome. You might very well see them in a class that I developed. So it was always a big help. Anyway, let's get to this activity. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to read off the question, and then if somebody would like to answer and give your thoughts, please do so. Number 1, explain what PCBs are, where they came from, and when they were first made. Who wants to take that one? Anybody?
I'll go.
All right.
PCBs are a man-made organic chemical made up of carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine. Could also be called chlorinated hydrocarbons. They were first discovered around 1865 by chimney sweeps in the coal tar, and first manufactured around 1927 by Aniston.
Nice. Excellent. That was very good. Anybody have anything else to add? All right, you shot that one dead. Good work. Number 2, list at least 3 materials that could likely contain PCBs. We'll have
I'll go. Electrical components,
Okay. Yep.
cable insulation,
Mhm.
paints,
Yep.
floor finish.
Yep. All right. That was an extra credit answer. You got 4 of them. Good. And there are a lot of other stuff. We're going to go through these in a minute. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that contain PCBs. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay. Number 3, agree or disagree. PCBs are harmful to human health. They are by far the greatest hazard that will be faced during your work. That may include PCB exposure. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with that, and why?
Agree. Because you
Agree?
can,
Okay, how come you?
you can absorb them through contact.
Yeah. Anybody else? This is, so I'll tell you, so as the training insight side of things, as our trainer, this is one of those questions that's kind of gray. People can agree or disagree with it as long as they defend it. And you can actually agree and disagree with different parts of this question.
Well, it's dangerous in the fact that it's everywhere.
What's that?
All right, it's dangerous in the fact that it's everywhere. And we were talking about it earlier where one of the guys had walked through, they've been using this pile of dirt to walk through after that had already been done, someone told them, hey, by the way, don't go walking through that dirt that's filled with PCBs. So not just to add the rest of the crap that we have to worry about throughout our day. Now we've got this.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? So I fully agree with the first statement. The second statement, it depends. I may agree or disagree with that. Let's say if you're doing some, abatement of caulking, but it happens to be, 35 feet up in the air, that fall hazard might be pretty significant. The ground might be impactful, pun intended, right? If you had a fall. So although they might be significant health hazard, it might not be the worst hazard you're facing on the job that day. That's why it's really important to have a well-educated workforce about health and safety hazards, but it's also important that you have an employer that's got a good health and safety program, and competent, qualified health and safety professionals aiding in the work. So that one's a neat question. So again, you can have, students answer this in a couple different ways. They definitely are harmful to human health. That's a yes. But then the second part of that, you could agree or disagree or say it depends. How about number 4, agree or disagree? PCBs are only a concern for worker exposure and worker health. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, we're taking this home potentially, depending on the sizes, just the cloud of dust from perhaps me sitting down and it plumes off of my shoulder or my fancy cap. That's enough that I could spread it to my kids, to my pets, people around.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And you know what I don't like about Zoom is it's hard to learn people's names because the little tab where everybody's name was disappeared on me. Oh well. So your question, your comment was really good. Oops. There we go. Your comment was great because we've got a lot of study that has shown from lead and asbestos that workers do indeed bring that home to their families. And I delivered a lead course a couple weeks ago, and there's a number of studies that was done, and I showcased one of them where they looked at, I can't remember now, like 20 or 30 lead workers and their families, and then they had a control group in the same neighborhood. Almost an equal number of families where those people did not have any exposure or work with lead. And it was shown that the children and the family members of the lead workers had elevated blood lead levels. So you can bring this stuff home, and that's important to understand. So good. Let's see. How about if it's just like, maybe you're not working with it at all, but if it's in a building material, do the occupants of that building have to be concerned?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So again, it's nasty stuff. As Wayne told me when we first started working around this stuff, he said, geez, Bernie, lead's bad stuff, asbestos is bad stuff, but these PCBs have so many health effects, right? And unfortunately, it's something that does have a lot of different health effects associated with it. And lead's pretty nasty too. Out of the 3, I think PCBs and lead are the get the lion's share of how it harms people. How about number 5, agree or disagree? PCBs are easy to detect and may be recognized without testing. Yeah, I see people shaking their head. No, yeah, this is no. They're not easy to detect. They're not easy to recognize. You've got to test for them, which is going to bring up some issues as we're going to see. Getting through tomorrow and the next day. How about number 6? Use any of the provided resources. And again, the stuff that you'll get as a trainer, and I guess it's on the LMS in the LMS folder. There's a bunch of resources that I have there. There's a number of things that I suggested that you read as a trainer if you're going to deliver this course, because it's one thing to have, a set of slides. Hopefully they're good. Hopefully it's a good class that you're working off of, but whether it's this class or any class, you want to be able to answer a couple questions deep, so if I have a slide that says PCBs are dangerous, and then a student says, well, why are they dangerous? I should be able to answer that. And then they might say, well, how do you know that? I should be able to answer that. And for, a typical trainer who, might not be a professional in a certain subject matter, answering 2 questions back is good enough. Once you get to that point, you phone a friend. You can always call me, right? If it's something that I'm supposed to be an expert in, I should be able to answer questions, 4 or 5 deep, and then phone a friend. So you want to be able to, prepare, and it makes you more comfortable too when you're delivering your material. I'm sure I could ask you question after question about, industrial coatings, and you'd be able to fall off, one answer after another. But you're used to doing that. So if you're not used to doing this kind of stuff, look through those materials and prepare till you get comfortable, I guess is a good way to put it. So what we're going to do now is just go through these. I've got a couple different things on the left column, and you want to answer with the stuff on the right column. Although I noticed I gave the first column's answer away a little bit. So anyway, how about 1979? What would you select for that one? You can just go C, whatever. I just give me the
C.
Yep.
when EPA issued final regulations.
But how about Monsanto?
Jay,
J, yep, they made 99% of the stuff. How about chlorine atoms? What'd you get for an answer on chlorine?
A,
No, chlorine atoms, I got I. The number of this makes PCB conjugate more stable, toxic, persistent, and less volatile. How about caulking? What'd you get for caulking?
I don't have caulking.
H.
H, yep. May be a significant PCB exposure risk. 1936.
G.
G, scientists issued a report attributing worker disease symptoms. 209.
A.
A, yep. So I'm gonna erase the 209 different chemical
That went through me.
Yeah, I'm gonna replace that with this is the number of. How about 1865? What we got?
E. E.
E, yep, good. E, first PCB like chemical discovered. 1920s.
E.
B,
B, yep, when PCB production and started. How about
F.
aeroflow? F, good. And asbestos and lead.
D,
D, good. Excellent. So this is the first activity. Again, I would split folks up into groups. Especially if you're in, face-to-face stuff. It's a lot easier to have, activities face-to-face because it's hard, especially if you don't have other monitors or stuff like that. You got to fiddle around with what windows are open. Also, you can give packets of, resource material out to, to folks in a group. So, split this up and have folks report back. And again, it should take you about 30 minutes if you had a group of 20 students and we are face-to-face. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. So now we're going to look at where some of this stuff is. And I've got 1121. So once we get through these next few slides, I'm just going to bring up a couple of recent issues in the news about PCBs. And we'll close off the day like that. So 60% of these things were used for dielectric fluids, transformers, capacitors, and high voltage cables. Anybody know the reason why?
Stable.
Yeah, the stuff was stable. Remember that really high boiling point. So it didn't break down, it was great for this use. 28% were used as ingredients to manufactured products. So rubber, plastic, adhesives, you can see a bunch of stuff there. Anything on this list that IUPAT members might come in contact with? Probably quite a few things there, huh?
Yeah,
Obviously
maybe
paint.
paint.
Huh?
Maybe paint, I said.
Yeah, maybe paint.
Yeah.
Adhesive, sealant compounds. 12% was used as hydraulic and heat transfer fluids. Again, very stable stuff, high boiling point, a great heat dump, right? So if you're doing metalworking type stuff where you've got rubbing of metal components, cutting, etc., it's going to dissipate the heat, well. Used in coatings, mostly found in green paint, but also blues, yellows, orange, and reds. So this is good. PCBs are currently allowed at less than 25 milligrams per kilogram with a 50 milligram per kilogram maximum in pigments under TSCA. And you'll find this too with lead, right? So this is a problem. So we know that this stuff is, they're carcinogenic. They've got a number of health effects, and we'll cover this more tomorrow. But is anyone familiar with what the Center for Disease Control says is the what you should be allowed to be exposed to if it's a carcinogen? Like what's an acceptable exposure for a carcinogen? What does the CDC say? Zero, because we do not know, you know, toxicity wise, what level or that you're going to need in your body to develop or promote cancer. And it's going to be different for everybody, but we just don't know, right? It's not something that our science can currently determine. And what CDC says on their cancer page is that the more exposure you have to a carcinogen, your greater risk. So your risk goes up. It never gives you zero risk. There's no such thing as zero risk if you're exposed to a carcinogen. It's just the more you're exposed, the higher your risk goes up. So can somebody explain to me in this wide world, why then we still have PCBs in building materials? Isn't it crazy?
Because it works.
Yeah, because it works.
You're right.
You know, maybe they can't find something else that will, you know, take its place. In this day and age, I kind of highly doubt that. I think it has to do more with, you know, not just productivity, but profit, because it does cost more money to switch a process, a work process, right? So if they're used to using, you know, certain ingredients in something, to switch that out is going to cost something to do, right? But nonetheless, we still have it in paint. So, you know, you do need to be cognizant of this. So you might be working with something that has PCBs in it. So if anybody is not, you know, incredibly pressed for time, if you don't want to watch reruns of your favorite sitcom tonight, I know I've reached the end of Netflix. I had to go onto other streaming services to not rewatch stuff. Go ahead and look up, you know, some of the paints that you use and see from their SDS sheets if they've got PCBs in them. You know, it'll be interesting to find out. That was somewhat of a joke. I'm not assigning any homework. Bernard does not do that. Oh my God, I just referred to myself in the third person. See, Manisha, this is what I'm talking about. I now have complete COVID fatigue. I'm referring to myself as a third person. Oh God. So yeah, we understand, right? No homework. So this is pretty interesting here. So from the 40s to, you know, to the ban, PCBs were added as plasticizers to coatings. And this is some of the, you know, the stuff and reasoning why. So, you know, as a plasticizer could be 5 to 30% PCBs, corrosion, heat, and furnace resistant, was used in aerospace and marine applications. Again, stable. Enhanced structural activity, integrity, and adhesion. So you can see there's a bunch of really interesting connections to PCBs in coatings. And there's a lot of stuff that we need to be concerned about. This is just, you know, a little example of some of the, you know, the total concentration in nanograms per gram of paint from Sherman-Williams, Pittsburgh, and Vogel. I'm not familiar with this brand. Is this a United States brand, Vogel?
No, that's a facility of ours in South Carolina, Plant Vogel. That's the only time I've ever heard of it.
No, I think it's actually a manufacturer that was up in the Midwest.
Midwest, okay.
Yeah, Vogel paint.
Yeah. But we can see, I mean, they're fairly, you know, standard with the concentration, right? Especially for the green. So this is something, you know, that is incredibly chaotic, and it blew my mind. So you figure, you know, well, how different can concentrations of PCBs be in different coatings? Well, here's one example where they actually took quantitative samples to have them analyzed. And we can see these, you know, somewhat similar, you know, shades of brown or tan, you know, are still different. And this here is a brown or tan, maybe you could say mud gray. Come on, Bernie. But look at the difference, 5,200 ppm compared to, you know, 188. And then here we got green, you know, 163. And remember the green slide from before, it was shown that, you know, for the most part, greens are prevalent. And I can't remember my color wheel right now. I don't know if they use the green pigment in browns at all or tans. But this is a pretty significant difference, don't you think? So you really want to test everything. So you can't just test one surface. You got to test each individual, component of the building material that you are concerned about. Production of plasticizer applications from 58 to 1971. Again, 145 million pounds of this stuff, until they started to phase it out. And I'm going to show you a news article about Monsanto phasing out PCB use at the end of the class. Here's a short list of materials that can contain PCBs. This is not exhaustive. Fluorescent light ballast, window glazing, varnishes, paints and coatings, floor mastics, window gaskets. You can see a lot of stuff here. And it might be easier to say what an IUPAT member is not likely to be exposed to from this slide, right? To my mind, there's a lot of stuff that IUPAT members need to be, cognizant about that's on the slide.
Fluorescent light ballasts.
What's that?
All of them except for maybe fluorescent light ballasts anymore.
Right.
Or
if you happen to work at a training center and you've got the old light ballasts and one starts leaking, right? So this is the interesting thing is that it's for me, it's fun because I've got two separate but connected groups of work. I've got the IUPAT trades and then I've got the training centers, right? So there's two connected things of work there. And, you're going to have some hazards that might be different in each one of those subgroups of IUPAT members. So if you are, a DOT or a training coordinator or a trainer, you might have some additional things that you might not see out on the construction site.
Sign display guys will work with fluorescent light ballasts all the time.
Okay. Okay. That's why I love doing, training classes. I learned something new. That's awesome. Thank you. Not just at work though, so stuff that you have in home, you might have PCBs at home as well. The problem is, even though it was banned in 1979, if the material is still out in use in the world and it's not abated and sent to a remediation facility, it's going to be releasing into the environment until it's cleaned up. All right, so it's always going to be there until we clean it up. It does not have a very mobile. It's not mobile on soil. So if you spill either a solid or a more liquid, PCB product, it's not going to percolate down and get through the soil easy. It's going to stay there. It's not going to break down and dissipate. You want to be able to look at building materials, if you're going to be using something that's already in use, part of a building that you're working on, or if you're going to be using something new. So we're going to look at some historic cases here. So this is, some caulking that's, at a school. And if you are, working around caulking, either a glazer, or if you happen to get into it, on the painter side or whatever, you got to be cognizant of what you're using because this is a significant exposure risk if you're going to be dealing with caulking. It's been used in any building material that's been installed. I'll say since the early 1980s, because if you can imagine with lead or asbestos, they have similar ban times, but did the business owner all of a sudden wipe their shelves clear of lead paint? Right, in 1978, no, it takes a while for a regulatory thing to get out and for them to start abiding by it. So I would say early 80s, you want to be cognizant.
Hey, Bernie,
Yeah.
While you were talking, I looked up Vogel, and it's now called Diamond Vogel, and it's kind of in I know of two people in this class. It's in your backyard. It's in Orange City, Iowa.
Okay, thank you, Wayne.
So that's where
Diamond Vogel. Okay,
Vogel came from.
Thank you. That's why it's always nice to have more than one trainer and doing TT stuff. Thank you. Again, this is telling. Okay, so this is not made up. This is a real school. That's what's shocking about this stuff. So PCBs in building materials can range from a few ppm to over 100,000. So This is all on the same building, okay? Different portions of material. So glazing compound tested at 1700 ppm. Caulking between metal lintel and wood soffit up to 45 ppm. Caulking around windows up to 40,000 ppm. And then caulking between metal lintel and metal window frame up to 48 ppm. So look at the wide range here, you know, and concentration of PCBs for the different materials. It can be a significant exposure risk and should be tested prior to disturbance. However, there is no law currently requiring testing of caulking for PCBs or any other material for that matter. The problem is once you do test, and if a building owner finds it there, then they have to handle it, they have to abate it. And that causes the issue. You know, there was a well-to-do citizen in Massachusetts that was going around to schools and taking pieces of caulking from the building on the outdoors and having it tested under his own dime, and then publishing the results in a newspaper because he wanted to bring you know, wherewithal and shine a light on PCB exposure to kids and school staff and faculty members. Nonetheless, if you know, school officials saw him coming, and once he became known, that was not good. But once you find out about it, you have to do something about it. And we've got lots of you know, current news articles about how communities, you know, school boards are now dealing with the fact that they've now got $100,000, couple $1 million job they're staring at, and they didn't know it before. However, this kind of thing does not sit right with me, you know, as a worker health activist, and you know, because look, I want to know if there's a hazard that my kids are facing, right? Or as workers are facing in their building. So if we don't require it to be tested for, you know, that doesn't sit right with me. And so, you know, you can say, well, it's in the best interest of a building owner not to have this stuff tested. Because once they know about it, then they have to do something about it. You know, anybody want to have any discussion around that? So again, there is no law that is current, you know, federal law that requires you to test for PCBs and building materials.
Well, on that same note, Bernie, you're talking about testing, is I've always bring this up is where there is no required testing for it, if you take your child or even yourself, a lot of these PCBs exposures that you're going to show mimic other illnesses.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know you're working around PCBs, they're going to diagnose you with another illness versus what it really is. And that's the sad part about it.
Yep, good point. All this is here I have on the screen is this is it's a test that we do in a lab that helps determine if you have something by how it's retained in the instrument. And so we see here just PCBs is going to go through this column. It's called you know, chromatography, high temperature, high pressure liquid chromatography. And they're going to send it in. We've got some other things that they sent through, like corn oil. So corn oil, depending upon what its, you know, percentage is, if it's pure, is going to come out in the machine at a certain time. So you know that's corn oil. And they run that with standards to test it. Same with PCBs. Depending upon the conjugar PCB, it's going to come out and it's tested at a certain time. So we know it is that. And then based on how big this peak is, they can determine what the concentration is of the PCB. So this is just what a chemist would look at if they ran through you know, material with PCBs in it. Imagine all the applications for caulking, you know, that you would have on a typical building. Those are all sources of exposure. You know, here's a window into New England Public School. This PCB's concentration was up to 22 parts per million. You know, here we got an example of, you know, PCB laying and caulking. We've got some chalk drawings of kids, you know, so the kids are playing around this stuff. They're exposed to it. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I would be like, hey, wow, look at this stuff is breaking off the building. Let me try to take more of it off, my 5-year-old self, right? So you're going to have kids that are just naturally curious. They're going to, you know, play with this stuff if they find it. One of the problems is as that stuff flakes, cracks, deteriorates, it falls off the building and it can then contaminate the ground. Right, so it doesn't stay put. right? Once this stuff starts to deteriorate, leak, what have you. That's why it's good for us to be able to identify this stuff and then abate it properly. Materials such as wood, cement, and brick, if they come in contact with it, can absorb the PCB. So, you know, it's just like you dropping a little bit of, you know, oil on a piece of cardboard. Try to get that oil stain out. It's not going to happen. Yeah, Jim. Nope. So it's one of the issues is, you know, there's testing requirements. Once you do know you have it, you have to test surrounding materials to see if the PCBs migrated and contaminated those materials. If they did, if it meets the definition, then all that stuff is PCB waste. And as we're going to learn later on, that can be quite expensive. At-risk populations such as kids can be exposed to it, you know, just based on their everyday activities that they do. And again, here's more chalk drawings, you know, from that school that I showed earlier. I mentioned, you know, it's part of a trio, so all this stuff was banned about the same time. So chances are good or bad, depending upon how you want to look at it, that if you've got lead and asbestos, you've also got PCBs and vice versa. This is just a bunch of examples. We could go on and on looking at these here, you know, expansion joints. We mentioned the oil and the ballast. So here's an example of a you know, leaking ballast in a public school. And the New York City teachers, you know, were able to win a victory about removing all the PCB ballast because they were being affected, you know, by exposure to this stuff in the New York City schools. Or maybe it was just Queens. I can't remember now. I'll look it up for tomorrow. Remember, PCBs are in all coatings and adhesives you might work with. They also might be in some new stuff that you've got. And that's it. That's the end of module 1. Do we have any comments or questions? The take homes is this stuff, it was useful. It's found in a lot of building materials and it is all over the place. And it needs to be handled appropriately so that you don't get exposed to it and potentially sick as a worker. What do you think? Any comments or questions?
I got kind of a question comment. Back on that slide where you showed that they did some testing in a room on the different colors.
Yep.
And the floor numbers are really high.
Yep.
Do we think that the floor numbers are really high because of the color, or is it more the durability of the floor coating itself?
It's the plasticizer that's in it, Justin.
So
it
it's
makes
more,
the floor material, it makes it more durable.
okay.
Because they put more percentage in.
Okay, that was kind of my question and what I figured, but I figured I'd ask some people that have used those products.
You know, most self-levelings that you use, you know, kind of a rubbery type, bendable before they break. You know, what does a urethane or epoxy do? It crumbles. It, you know, it gets real hard.
Geez, now I'm thinking, Wayne, thank you. My kids just talked me into buying a bunch of cans of plastic spray for a project they were doing because it basically coats a rubberized paint on something. Rubberized coating, so I should check the safety data sheets. I sent them outside to use it though. Good ventilation. Thanks, Wayne. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, so I wanted to going to share my screen here. Where am I? Let's see. Can you guys see my browser? Is it browser that's up? Okay.
Yep, we see it.
All right, so this is, you know, this is just a news article, and you can go to the base source of this. It's called the Poison Papers Project. So Monsanto's sold banned chemicals for years despite known health risks, archives reveal. So the data that was unearthed by a number of folks that were looking into this found that they were selling PCB laden materials for up to 8 years past the ban. And we're talking about 20,000 internal memos, minutes, meetings, letters, et cetera. So that's a pretty significant paper chain, right? So, these are issues. So I mentioned, just as a rule of common sense, look, if it was banned in 79, chances are people use stuff, a few years later than that. This is something a little bit more potentially insidious. And it's connected not just to the US courts, but other countries are looking at how and when, Monsanto might have been selling PCB-laden material as well. So again, if you want to follow this, it's called the Poison Papers Project. You can look up, some of the base material for this news article, so you can get to the original literature. Let's see, this is another one here. This just came out, and this looks. I'm wondering if this is Burlington, Vermont. So again, Building Construction Oversight Committee raises questions around mitigation of PCBs at Burlington High School. So there's a number of these examples because, they found stuff in public buildings and schools, that kids are in and people use. And once you find it, you got to do something with it. So, the abatement has to be done appropriately, just like you would with lead or asbestos, and this is a good source of work, potential work for IUPAT members. And I think that's, one of the things that drew Wayne and Jim to this initially. So again, there's a lot of articles out there like this. I'll share some other examples that are occurring right now. Tomorrow after we go through the toxicology environmental portion of the training. And after tomorrow, if you don't think that PCBs are a significant issue and a health risk for IUPAT members, I don't know what else we'd have to show, but I think you'll agree after tomorrow's presentation. And again, I really like the fact that this could lead to some really good high-skilled work for our members. But Wayne and Jim, I want to give the floor to you guys for any comments or questions and thoughts about what we talked about today.
No, I think we pretty much hit everything, Bernie. I think more of the discussion will probably happen between tomorrow and Wednesday.
Yeah. Again, doing this as, being an industrial hygienist as a living, looking at this stuff, there's a lot of chemicals out there. So it's only reasonable that I can spend so much time at any given moment. But once I started digging into this stuff, at the request of Wayne and Jim, my eyes were open to just how widely used this stuff was. It was an eye opener to be sure. Jim, you got anything you want to
do
add?
y'all know why that the ban was put in effect? The EPA banned it. Is because of the eagles, the bald eagles, which is our national bird or whatever. The chicks couldn't chip out of the eggs. So what do you think that's doing to our kids that's, exposed to this stuff? Now, I've got my youngest daughter had lead poisoning as a fetus inside my wife, and I brought the stuff home. And she ended up having autism and grandma seizures from the lead poison and epoxy poison as a painter. Every time you get in your car, if you slap the seat, what happens? Can you tell me, Matt? Can't hear you, Matt. We ain't heard from you all day.
Yeah, you make a nice dust cloud.
Yeah.
Nice
What
big
do
dust
we-
cloud.
There it is. That's why we really don't need to have our kids in our work cars, if it's possible, especially the ones that's got young kids or grandkids in my and Wayne's way. So,
Well, Jim, I don't worry about that because I got the extra small Tyvek and a full face respirator for my kids and grandkids. So when we go to the ice cream shop, that's what they get.
is that just for the COVID? Well, all kidding aside, guys, my grandson got exposed last Thursday from his therapist. So it's not good. It's not kosher. This stuff's nasty.
Yeah. Anybody that took the course, you guys want to ask any questions, any comments before we close off today?
This is kind of a question for you, Bernie. My main trade's drywall finishing, and I've still got a lot of friends in the non-union sector that do work on houses. And, you know, over the years, I've learned about all these safety regulations with lead, asbestos, and all the other dangerous chemicals and products. And there really isn't a lot of enforcement in residential construction. Do you have any idea maybe that why that is?
A lot of it has to do with politics, you know, the like the National Home Builders Association, et cetera. You know, I know, especially speaking to the fall protection, because when I first started practicing industrial hygiene, I was asking some of my mentors, why does it seem like there's different fall protection rules for, you know, people building homes as opposed to people building skyscrapers? You know, so that I got into politics, you know, early to understand that, but I don't know. I know, you know, it's tricky because OSHA's not there to put, you know, small businesses out of business, or anybody out of business. They're there to protect workers. Unfortunately, you can't get something for nothing, right? So it does cost money to make sure that you are training people appropriately and you've got the appropriate, you know, protections in place. And sometimes small businesses, you know, can't step up to that. However, it's not an excuse that they can't do it. They have to, right? More often than not, when I've run into, you know, smaller contractors and stuff like that, they don't even really know what OSHA does. You know, it's such a disconnection. You know, when I look at, you know, non-union places and you know, union places, or larger and smaller companies. Because I've seen, you know, non-union companies, small versus large. The larger folks know what they have to do, you know, because they've got the resources. Other than that, I don't know. I'm actually going to be talking to a colleague of mine, Jim Frederick. He's going to be teaching at Ken Seal's DOT session tomorrow, specifically about OSHA inspections, because he's done a ton of them. He was the assistant director of health and safety for the steelworkers for about 25 years. And unfortunately, the steelworkers members suffer a fatality every 14 days. So Jim has done lots of inspections. So I'm going to be speaking with him just to prep for tomorrow. I'll ask him that question. Okay. If anybody has an answer, it's going to be Jim. Good question. Not for nothing, though. We do know that union jobs are 5 times less likely to suffer a fatality than non-union jobs. So it's much safer to work on a union job site. A lot safer. 5 times is significant.
You
Yeah,
said
You
we have,
got something?
Go ahead, who was up?
Go ahead, Matt.
You are,
I just
Matt.
want to ask,
Go ahead.
Friday you said we have an 8-hour class. What time does that start?
Oh no, it's this full class.
It's 2 hours.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
just 2 hours.
I thought you had said a trainer on Friday.
Yeah, no, so this class is the awareness class is an 8-hour class, but we're doing this as a train the trainer. So on a 5th day, we decided to throw in 2 hours just to discuss some other material from the perspective of a trainer, and open it up if anybody's got any comments or questions, things like that.
I got you. Thank you.
Yep, so same time, 10 to 12, only 2 hours on Friday.
All right, Bernie, so in your opinion, you see anything coming that just coming our way that's gonna, I mean, once we take this, we're trying to convince contractors to train their people, trying to convince members to get the training. We looking at anything, any regulations coming our way that we're gonna have to start testing, say, you know, in the bridge industry, coatings for the glazers, start testing the caulking. I mean, what are we looking at here? I mean,
Very good question, Matt. I'm glad you didn't ask me an easy one. So as far as an actual federal worker rule like we have for asbestos or lead, not in the near future. However, there's been a lot of discussion, and I can actually say this. I participated in the Biden transition team, their Department of Labor meeting for AFL-CIO a couple weeks ago. they're very serious about, worker health and safety rights, as well as an infrastructure bill. And I mean, there was just an article, I think either on CNN or the New York Times, about an infrastructure bill, which we need. I've said this in a number of instances over the past month. I joke, I've got a number of bridges I kind of cross my fingers when I drive across in my town. We've needed one for decades. If something like that is going to happen, and I believe it will, especially if it's in a large degree, we're going to have so much increase in exposure to asbestos hazards, lead hazards, PCB hazards. I could imagine that some forward-thinking, peers of ours who are in the administration would say, hey, we got to make sure that our workers are protected, and all this stuff is going to come with working on this bridge or this radio tower or whatever. That would be, a proactive thing to do, although it's not necessarily governed by law right now. But once something is tested for, you do have to, handle and manage the PCBs appropriately in accordance with EPA, just like you would with lead or asbestos. It then becomes more of a public health environmental issue. However, there is, and this is stealing a little bit of thunder from Wednesday, there is an OSHA PEL for PCBs for 2 different chlorine concentration PCBs. We'll talk more about that. So we can use the general duty clause, to look at this. So let's say if I've got, an IUPAT crew working on, a bridge that was, maybe built in 1968 and maybe was recoded in 75. I could use some information on my side to give weight to developing a worker exposure sampling protocol by saying, hey, look, probably this stuff is going to be there because it was, did during this time period. Under the general duty clause, if that's a hazard that's there and we kind of know about it, we should test, workers' exposure and then appropriately protect for it. So there's some ways around if you've got a crafty industrial hygienist or something like that we can use what we've got, but it's not easy. I'm sorry, I know I didn't completely answer your question. I left a lot of open ends there, but that's the best.
Bernie, let me follow up. Matt, on that same note, I know you work for a contractor. Let's just say that he sees in his bid documents that it is PCB,
Right.
and it kind of scares him off because he doesn't think the guys are trained for it. That's where you can mobilize us in a hurry, and we could actually run the worker course, because I know the laborers only run a 4-hour awareness course. We're running an 8-hour awareness course and a 32-hour worker course. So therefore, we're not trying to scare any of our contractors off by this. We're trying to give them more power so they can feel secure that they can do this and make our workforce healthy and go home healthy.
And if you think about it too, Matt, our lead abatement contractors, our bridge guys, even our good industrial contractors are already set up to take care of this problem. They're already taking care of it in some instances with the respirators and the blast hoods and the containments and the dust collectors and stuff. But a good thing is Wayne has actually talked to Senator Markley out of Massachusetts, and we're going to try to get this shoved down our throat so we can get a law made. Hopefully it happens.
This is why I like working with Wayne. Yeah, we're going to solve world peace next. So that was some excellent, buttressing of my answer to that question, and they're absolutely right. So now that you've jogged my memory, so if a building owner or a project owner, like a state government, right, says, hey, we've got this project, we know PCBs are in it. Guess what? Then yes, you have to abide by that because the employer knows that there is some amount there, and their bid package can reflect that. They can say we need X amount of money because this is how we're going to handle PCBs, as opposed to somebody who says we want this amount of money and we don't know how we're going to handle PCBs, right? So it actually gives a nice bridge, for a contractor if they want to make a different income stream. And we'll show some more examples of this on Wednesday when we talk about rules and regulations and guidance. But I mean, there's a great example of a building in Washington, D.C. that was owned, the project was owned by the architect of the Capitol, where they were going through it, and all of a sudden they had to spend lots of extra time. The job shut down, and they're looking at, I can't remember now how many extra millions of dollars it was. because somebody tested for and found PCBs in addition to lead and asbestos. But the PCBs was one of the issues of, uncontrolled that they didn't account for. So if you start a project after the fact and it comes out that there were PCBs there, not only do you have a problem now with the public, but you've also got some liability with potentially the building owner, or the employer, or all of them. And you might have some liability with workers because they can come back and say, hey, wait a minute, we weren't protected against this stuff and you exposed us with no controls. So if you had a contractor that was appropriately trained and prepared to handle this stuff, it actually, it's worth their while. And Jim's right, they've got everything they need to do this if they've already, do asbestos and lead work. It's the same thing, basically. You just have a different waste stream.
Have you noticed it any, Matt, in any of the specifications on the jobs?
Not yet. Haven't noticed it yet.
Down here, it's been in the last 5 documents that McCormick has used, and that's in Corps of Engineers and also Energy Corporation, Southern Company, Alabama Power. It's in there. It shows that there is traces of the PCBs.
Right.
And I talked to Barney last week or whenever it was. I'm getting in touch with Energy Corporation's head safety lady for the fossil side. And we're going to see what we can do with that. They're already mandating a PCB training through Louisiana Safety Council on certain projects. So this is something that we need to look at real hot and heavy to make sure if it is, then we can just implement our training that's in it, and then we should be above the par on training wise, and our people will be trained on that. They're already lead abatement, containments, all that. So we just need to add that PCB side in it.
That's great. I thank you guys, man. If anything you guys have, please send my way, because you know how the contractors are, especially, some of the older that have been around for a while. They're tough to convince, you know what I mean?
We pay you to pay, we don't pay you to pity patty.
Exactly. So we're gonna, I like what Wayne said. I mean, that's that's perfect to come at him with. But yeah, whatever you guys could send to me that that can. It's members are worse to get in for training, especially now.
Oh yeah.
They're worse. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. We still got people holding out on the on the CAS that they don't want to do it. They just don't want to do it. They take their lead. That's it. That's it. So, if we can convince them that this is something that's coming, all the better. I mean, it's not going to kill you, to learn something to protect yourself a little better against, something that could kill you or your family. So.
Well, you think about it with that infrastructure bill that Barney was talking about.
Yeah.
Just think of the man hours.
Yeah. No, that's boy, do we need it.
Yeah, we definitely need it right now.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it would be any workforce that already has this training, they're going to be positioned right out of the gate to get the work.
All right.
You'll be shovel ready, for lack of a better term, that they used to say that, right? And again, there's a lot of examples of where the PCB training and abatement was actually needed and conducted. And again, I'll share some within the last year news pieces on that with real projects. So no, good. And the other thing is, it's great that we have this class. I think it's a good class, and but it's useless if we don't get it out there, right? Who cares about it? And I don't know your economy any better than you do, right? You know it the best. So if we can get you some, either promotional materials or something like that, where you could pass this on, educate contractors, and even project owners, if folks at state and local governments, anything like that, it makes that connection to be able to get to the work. We could come up with a 1-page fact sheet, something like that, just on this and why it's important, and then what the IPAT has to offer in ways of training. And then also Jim and Wayne and I did a short presentation, sort of like an infomercial for this class and the worker class at the was it called the FIF or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
FIF.
Last December before COVID. Right. So we have some slides, you know, that we could share, stuff like that. And I mean, if you wanted to at any point, if you have the audience to have a short infomercial presentation like that, Jim Wayne and I'm sure we'd be able to, you know, do something like that because we've already got the slides to do it, the material. So.
Yeah, or if you need help with your class, don't hesitate to call. You know, we'll work something out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? We're at 12:04. If not, we'll be back same bat time, same bat channel. For those of you who watched the 1960s Batman. Yeah, tomorrow at 10, we're going to get into toxicology of PCBs. Monisha, anything we got to close off with?
Nope, that is it for today. See you guys tomorrow.
All right.
Have a good
Bye,
day,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Later, buddies.
See you guys.